In this mini lesson, we will learn how you can develop a web application on a remote server as if the files and folders are physically existing on your local machine. This kind of development is especially useful when you switch between several computers during the day and you want to resume your work from where you left off instantly. Also, since you are using a server, you'll benefit from its fast network speeds, and also you'll have faster DNS resolution, faster round-trip times. That means you can download items faster, you can fetch your project from GitHub faster, and actually anything related to networking will be much faster than doing the same thing on your laptop on your home network. And more importantly, you have a single source of truth for your work. You can edit your files on your laptop, save them, then safely eject your remote drive and shut down your laptop, and you're done. Later in the day, you can resume your work on a different machine. Let's assume that it's your desktop this time, and you can resume your work from where you left off, because as soon as you mount your remote file system to your desktop, you'll immediately see the changes that you made before on the laptop. In order to create remote mount points or remote removable drives on our computers, you can use something like MacFuse if you're on a Mac operating system, or WinFSP if you're using Windows, and it's relatively easy to do that for free with minimal effort, but instead I'll use a tool called ExpanDrive, which to me has a more intuitive user interface, and it's arguably easier to set up and use. And the fun fact is, ExpanDrive also uses OSXFuse or WinFSP behind the scenes. That clarified, let me go to my AWS console. I'll use this jump host as my development server. So when I do an SSH EC2 user at jump host, I'll shell into this EC2 box. So in our EC2 instance, under the projects folder, I have various projects that I develop at the moment. And since I SSH'd into this VM, I can always use something like Vim or Emacs to edit my files, but when working on my projects, I prefer to use the tools that I feel more productive or the tools that I'm more familiar with, like Visual Studio Code, for example, or WebStorm or Sublime, which is not possible when you edit the files on an SSH connection on the terminal. So what I'll do is I'll mount the file system on this server as a removable drive on my laptop. But for that to work, I'll first need to set my SFTP subsystem to internal SFTP by editing this etc ssh sshd_config on my EC2 server, because if you don't do it, you'll probably get an error when you try to mount your remote drive over SFTP. At least that was my experience, but when I changed this line, everything worked just fine. And I don't know if this is the only way to solve it, and to be honest, I didn't research too much into it, but that line of change solved my SFTP connection problem to my EC2, so I wanted to share it before going any further. Next, I'll click this ExpanDrive icon and fill in the required connection info, and when I click connect, I can see all my project's files and folders in this jump host volume as if they physically exist on my local file system. But can I edit them on my local code editor or on my local IDE as well? Well, let's see. I'll launch WebStorm and open this 0-to-hero mocks projects folder. Well, I can see the files in it, so that's good. And I can also edit the files in it. But how can I test it? How can I run this web app? Well, I can run it locally if it's simple enough, but if I have dependencies on the remote server, like for example a Redis cache or a remote testdb or something that I cannot simply install or expose on my local laptop, then I may need to SSH into the remote server and start the project from there instead. So I'll do that and SSH into my jump host, cd into the project folder, and run a simple HTTP server there. So note that this could have been a Node.js server or a Ruby server or a Go server or any other server. The important point is this is a web application running on the remote server's localhost. But there is a problem. I want to see this website in a browser, but I cannot currently do it because for security reasons, web access to our test server is disabled. So what can we do instead? We'll create a secure reverse proxy or a secure tunnel using ngrok and preview our web app through that tunnel. So what is ngrok, you may ask? ngrok is a service that provides secure and introspectable tunnels to your local machine. Well, what I mean will be clearer when I show how it works actually. For that, I'll open a second tab and create another SSH connection to the remote EC2 instance, and then I'll run ngrok http 8080, where this 8080 is the local port that our web application is serving at the moment. And then when I press enter, ngrok will do its magic and provide me with a public URL that I can preview this web app. When I tap the URL, I can see the page in action. So let's do a few minor changes, like changing the pointer style from hand to default on these tabs and buttons using my IDE, which is WebStorm. Then save our files and refresh the browser. When I do that, the changes have magically been applied to our web application too, and now instead of a hand cursor, I see a default arrow cursor on the tabs and on the buttons, which also demonstrates that you can work on a remote file system as if those files and folders were on your local drive. And that was a quick demo of how you can do remote development at the comfort of your local IDE or your local development setup by using ExpanDrive and ngrok. And until the next lesson, may the source be with you.